Hello, everyone. How y'all doing? That's not to YouTube, folks. It's to Danielle Mack because I
Oh,
think you can actually reply right away. But if you are in the chat, please tell us how you're doing as well.
Like sound off in the comments.
Yeah, that's right. Unmute.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
same. It's good to be back.
Good to be back. Well, for those who have never been here before, welcome to Bible Study Live. My name is Miche van Essen. I'm the Director of Operations for Transmission Ministry Collective. So that typically means that I'm in the background. That's why you probably don't see my face too often. With us today, we have our BSL regular, Mack. Mack, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Mack. Pronouns are he, him, and I've been doing this for a couple months now, having a great time. And outside of this, I am working on a PhD in New Testament transgender interpretation.
All I'm saying, say no more, but say more. Absolutely, Danielle.
That's all I got.
Yes. How about you?
My name is Danielle Dilger, pronouns she, her. I work for the state of California at the University Library at Cal Poly, and I'm one of the Discord mods. So my contribution to TMC is to make friends and sit on the computer. And it's my very first time being on BSL.
Yes, your first time at BSL,
Yes.
which is great. Welcome and thank you so much for being with us. As you can all see on the thing there below, Danielle, John 1. We're doing John 1. I went through the archives of TMC and saw that we never done John 1. And I thought, that's fun. Let's try it out. We always prepare a doc, right? What could go wrong? We always prepare a doc. Yep. It is filled with people's thoughts. So I don't think we're gonna get further than verse 18. But yeah, so in case you're new to this, here's the deal. We're just gonna read a little bit, each in our own translations, and then we're just gonna discuss it. But before we get into it, Mac, would you give us a little background on what is John? Who is John for? Why is John?
Yeah. All very good questions. Well, John is our latest gospel, written the latest. And people say that the Christology of John, or at the very least, the Christology of Jesus, not the Christology of John, and like the humanity of Jesus take like opposite trajectories as you go through the Gospels. And by the time you get to John, you get very much a cosmic, divine Jesus, and at most points, the least human seeming Jesus. And in John 1 is one of the places where we get a really big emphasis on the incarnation and the divinity of Jesus. It's very cosmic. And you get some tropes that will start at the beginning of John and continue on through the rest of it. Yeah, John was written for a community that we're not really sure about. We don't know too much about the Johannine community, except for we assume they were likely undergoing some persecution based on some stuff that definitely wasn't actually happening in Jesus's time, but the author just sort of sprinkled in there for flavor, because he's mad. Yeah.
I like that. Do you have anything to add, Danielle?
I think I really like how John cuts to the quick of things. He tells us why he's writing. He tells us at the end of his gospel why he writes his gospel. He says, I'm writing these things so you can believe. And I need that. I need those like Cliff Notes version. His first epistle, right, comes out and goes, I'm writing to those who believe so that you can have this assurance of your salvation. And so I think just like what Mack was saying, the way that we see the kind of the trajectories and where John's going to say, listen, okay, there have been 3 gospels before. at least. And we're going to just get to the quick of things, what I think you need to know and believe, which is the divinity of Christ. And he comes out swinging, right? He doesn't say, I'm here to tell you the entire eyewitness testimony of the Savior, like Luke does. He says, listen, we're going to go back from the beginning.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I like what y'all said, especially the cosmic Jesus, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Star-Lord Jesus.
Exactly. This
That's-
Jesus, his birth is not important. What matters is that he was there before his own birth.
That's right. That's right. Oh my everything. I got so much to say about that, but let's get started. those are for those who don't know, I'm Jewish. Those are always like, huh. How do y'all do this, Christians? So this is gonna be fun. This is gonna be fun. Anyway,
I hope you're not
let's,
expecting an answer.
what? No, absolutely not. I just had a lot of adventures in seminary when we talked about certain passages, especially. I mean, we all remember the Revelation episode of BSL. That was fun. That was fun. Anyway, let's read John 1, verses 1 through 5. Who wants to get us going?
I'll start us off. John 1, 5 from the New American Standard. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him nothing came into being that has come into being. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it.
Let's go. First thoughts.
I have a fun textual variant that I didn't notice until just now, because I was looking at the NRSVUE, and the word comprehended in the NRSVUE says did not overtake it. And that's very different. So now I'm looking at that word so I can figure out what word that is.
Right. You're saying, John, that's verse
5.
Yeah, verse 5. Oh, yeah.
Overcome. Okay. Huh.
Yeah,
Okay.
katalambano, to lay hold of, to seize upon.
Yeah.
So I guess you could kind of get, yeah. Interesting.
Like, where's your
I
brain
grew up with KJV, so I was expecting comprehend.
Let's go. Yeah. I like saying it though, kataleben.
It's a fun word to say. Yeah, I think it's interesting because I feel like there's a big difference between the darkness does not overtake the light versus the darkness does not comprehend the light. Those feel very different to me.
Absolutely. Very different. Both can be true. They're not mutually exclusive, but it does certainly do on a different trajectory.
Yeah. I can't.
Because one sort of puts them in opposition. What was that, Miche?
I can't translate this word by itself. This is I'm like trying to remember since John 1.
Kata is against.
Right.
Or and then lambano is to take or to receive, to catch.
I like to catch. Let's go with to catch. Okay, y'all. We had a synod.
And the darkness caught it not.
And the darkness caught it not. They had a net, but the net had holes in it. So.
Well, it's the same word used in 8:3 when it says the scribes and the Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. It's that same word.
Caught, right? See, there you go.
Yeah.
Proof.
Caught intellectually or physically. Either way, they didn't do it.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I already like
it. Take us down that wormhole. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, it's good. We always have exotic translations here, Danielle. I always read from the blasphemic ESV. Um, Mac, you read NRSVU right now?
Yes,
Yeah.
but then have a good old time going back to my good friend the KJV.
Yes.
So I oscillate between the two extremes.
Yeah, I like it. And did you say that you have NASB, Danielle? Is that what you read from?
NASB, yeah, I've just invested too much.
Hey, yeah, listen, you got to do what you got to do.
I support it.
I support it too. Okay, so what are we thinking? There's so much packed in this. Obviously, lots of philosophy packed in, and you already alluded to it a little bit, Mac, that this is very grand. It's a grand entrance. Can you all share your thoughts?
Go ahead, Danielle. Pretty much all I've got off the top of my head is in the beginning is meant to sound like Genesis. So if it sounds, oh, that sounds like Genesis,
It's because it sounds like Genesis. Okay, yeah.
I was hoping you would mention that. I'm sitting here like the notes are have that first for a reason. So no.
Point one, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, it's this seminal moment in John's Christology, his presentation of the person and work of Christ, where we see Jesus, absent of any Old Testament theophanies, entering into human existence, entering into the physical human world, and it's preparing him, right? We're not seeing the nativity scene, we're not seeing the incarnation as the birth with Mary, but we're seeing him enter into our world and our lives in a much more personal way than has ever been seen before in the previous dispensations, previous revelations of Christ and or excuse me, of God. And so it's at this point in time we see really that fullness, I think, of God with us, right? That the fulfillment of that promise, and it's brought out in not just God with us, but God that was pre-eternal, pre-existing. And so, right, John comes out swinging. This is a big cosmic moment when you have this messianic expectation, which is being met, but it's not all that they expected, right? It's built upon, has so much extra there of what Messiah would say and do and be. And then one of the notes that I put is that there's also this response from the early Christians to the Gnostic understanding that I think that one of my more erudite colleagues can speak on in greater depth later. But
I like it.
Yeah, I also think it's this is because in Mark in particular, and if Mark was first, then leaching into the other synoptics, you get more of a theology of like adoptionism as far as the divinity of Christ, that like Jesus' baptism is a huge moment. And like that's a moment where you're like, oh, okay, something divine going on here. But John doesn't wait for that. John doesn't announce a birth. John doesn't wait to be like, oh, we're not sure. This one might be divine, but we have to wait till he gets dunked in some water till we find out for sure. He's like, from the very beginning.
let me correct.
And so
You might have.
exactly. Which is interesting and probably why he wasn't the favorite gospel of some folks, because one of the adoptionism, I guess I didn't really explain, is for anybody who doesn't know, adoptionism is like this theology idea that Jesus was not always God, that at some point God adopts Jesus as the Christ, typically at a moment of baptism. Like the dove comes down and says, "This is my son." And similar to like this, I don't remember what psalm, you probably would know better than me, Miche, on which psalm it is, of like, "This day have I begotten you." I don't remember which one that is off the top of my head, but it's one of them in a psalm. It's in a psalm.
In a psalm. Yeah.
"You are my son, this day I have begotten you."
Yeah.
Don't have the reference off the top of my head, but yeah. So this one, John's like, we're not messing around with that from the very beginning. This guy's, spoiler alert, God.
Yeah, yeah. To convince you to in the divinity of Christ and to worship Him and be transformed in that. That's what we're going to start off with.
Yeah.
Jesus divine. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because can we make a statement here? If John was not in the Bible, can we point to direct divinity of Christ's, divinity of Jesus passages?
It's a lot harder.
It is. And you kind of have to argue with, like, well, is that what Son of God means? Is that what Son of Man means? And you kind of have to argue the semantics of it. John is the one where you're like, there's no semantics going on here.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, exactly. I always thought that was interesting because then you get to the conversation is John adopted because that was the dominant theology, or is John adopted to dictate the dominant theology? Um, like how was it popularized? I have always wanted to sit down once and figure out how was it popularized, right? Because yeah, you're right. If we have this, we have to we can make arguments about what kind of divinity Jesus is, but we cannot make arguments about that Jesus is divine. And I think in John, it's very, very clear that's the statement that's being made, and also how it's done gospel wise. There's no story
Yeah,
here.
that's a good question. Was John adopted? Because people are like, these are good, but they're not making my statement blatant enough. We need something more obvious so that people stop arguing.
Right.
Absolutely. There could be a footnote that's like, hey, Gnostics, I'm looking at you. And so I think a lot of it, yeah, is responsive to the dividing issues of the day, right?
Yeah. Because we also have to deal with that whole fact then that if this is referring to the Genesis, let's assume that it's referring to the Genesis beginning, right? Then you also have in one fell swoop the pre-existence of at least the incarnated substance, like the logos. The logos was in existence. You could still make semantic arguments about like, yeah, but Jesus was not there. But you could not make arguments that the logos was not there. That pre-existed, and we can probably make a good argument post-existence as well. So you have some interesting theology going in here where it's not really open for interpretation. Do you think that's because it's written like so late and people were a little bit more opinionated?
I think so. Yeah, and I think it also, because it was written so late, you get a different sort of style in the writing since it's written so late as well. Yeah, I think like the others, like, is it Luke who starts off saying that he's going to give an orderly account of everything that happened because the others were just too messy, I guess. Like that's his goal. But John is very much on a theological mission.
Yeah.
And so I think that also changes it. Like he's not trying to tell a story, because if you're trying to tell a narrative, then you got to sort of figure out the pacing of it, and you have to decide like what stories you're going to include, what stories are you not. John's not concerned about giving you a play-by-play narrative, so he can just be like, here is my point, making this big statement at the beginning, and now we'll go through the rest of it. But I was also thinking what you're saying about, pre-existence being on line one, that sets Jesus up later, and it's something we see throughout the whole thing, because when we get to John 8, Jesus makes a statement.
Developed theology already. He's refining and going and introducing, because you don't need to know the historicity of Christ. Half of you walked with him, as we see in the first epistle of John. And so we're going to just cut to the meat and potatoes of the theology.
Well, he's also going to have Jesus say, before Abraham was, I am. And so you really need Jesus to be pre-existent for all those I am statements to come into play. And those are crucial to John's whole argument.
Yeah, and I would argue for modern day Christianity, regardless of denomination, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. No, John really sets me up because it's the first Greek text that we had to translate. It's like drilled in my brain. I also have eidetic memory, so it's very much drilled in my brain in reciting. But the funniest thing is that we had a Greek professor in the same university as the line made out of eyes inside and outside incident. Same school. We had a professor, and he came in. He said, I started learning violin at an old age, but I gave it my all. And now I'm good at playing violin. So I have high expectations of everyone. He was the sternest teacher in the world. And every time we've gotten to the letter mu, so many people would accidentally see U because it kind of looks like a U. And he would stop mid, like, when is it in like John 1? I think it's only coming in. Yeah, you have an instance in verse 7, like Marturian. Yes. Then somebody would say, you Arturian. And then the teacher would be, moo, moo, moo. And like yelling. Yeah, so loud. Oh. So my friend Kor and I used to make fantasy Street Fighter scenarios in our brain. And then we turned his sounds into imaginary Street Fighter sounds. Like instead of Omega, Omega, Omega. He was intense. Let's put it that way. It was an intense teacher. But anyway, those are my memories that I have of John. So I'm happy that y'all's memories of John is like, this is Star-Lord level awesome.
Well, I like this note that you put in here about how people like to comment John 1:1 on stuff. I like that note.
Oh, my everything. It doesn't matter. Like sometimes I have to make a reel to remind people, hey, y'all, the Bible is not God. And people literally copy paste John 1:1. I'm
You're like, okay, but you've misunderstood. The Logos is also not the Bible. The Bible is also not the Logos. Good try, though.
Yeah. So this was a conversation that I had with my father at an early age. This is probably when we should all realize that I'm slightly on a spectrum. But besides that, we had at this moment, like I asked my father, I was like, why do you believe that the Bible is true? And he said, well, because in the beginning there was the word. And it was like, but that's not about the Bible. And like didn't matter what argument I use. I was like, it's a Stoic term. Didn't matter. It's like, okay, let's pretend it is about the Bible, but then at least it's not about the entire Bible or whatever, right? Like it didn't matter what angle I would come. He would like repeat it. And there's this scene in Westworld where Rachel, what's her name again? I always say Rachel Held Evans, but that's the author.
Definitely not right.
Yeah. The voice actress of Anna and Elsa's mom. Let's go. It's Evan Rachel Wood, whatever. Anyway, she plays in Westworld. She's a robot, and every time she's presented with something that is outside of her programming, she answers with, that doesn't look like anything to me, even though it's like obviously something, right? And it's like, that doesn't look like anything to me. When I saw that scene, I got reminded of these conversations with my father. I'm like, are you a robot? Are you a robot?
Like our Logos.
Well,
We're just gonna.
I mean, I did Awana, and sound off in the comments if you ever also did Awana. But as part of that, in like the like tween teen, like 12-year-old or so books, like all the things were structured based on like a question and then an answer and a Bible verse that backed up that answer. And one of the questions was, how do we know that the Bible is true? And the answer was, we know because John 17:17b, thy word is truth.
It tells
And
us
so
it,
like
and what I
it
love.
tells you it is. And it took me a long time to be like, wait a second, that's a circle. We can't do that. It took me a
We
long time
can't.
because I was like, well, that checks out.
Yeah.
How do I know it says so? It's like, trust
Yeah.
me, believe me, we got this.
It's right.
Yeah, no, exactly. One of my favorite papers at Dallas Theological Seminary, where I made a 4-case argument why 2 Timothy 3:16 cannot speak about the Bible. Yeah.
Another good one.
My professors were not fans of me.
I can't imagine why.
I did not last long there. This was even when I had a 1-foot beard. I should have blended right in there. But no, those were the days. Not the 1-foot beard, the debates. The 1-foot beard was not, those were not the days.
I figured that's not the thing, drawing back the fondest of memories.
Yes, exactly. Anyway, before we read further, I do want to bring up one thing that I also noted in the notes. Like, I feel like I was very heavy on the first parts. Sorry, y'all. What is your thought about the usage of the term logos compared to other philosophical streams, like either as a prototype to I don't want to be anachronistic, right? Because there was no Neoplatonism yet, but like obviously there were streams to get towards there, but definitely Stoic philosophy used the term reason or the term logos. Why did we start venerating the term logos so much in Christianity? Why did we not just kept it translated as reason? And what are your thoughts on that? Is this a Stoic philosophy molded into Christianity, or is there something else going on?
I mean, I think it is. I think it's, as a young man reading this, I think it sounds weird. It doesn't make sense in the English language, but then I think it's what I would expect, right? This writer that's writing this gospel to the Hellenized world. But it's such a great question. Where's the veneration of it? The holy word, right? And I mean, that I think comes out of like 20th century American gospel, movement. But no, I mean, I think it's totally it's sprinkling of the Stoic philosophies, this Hellenistic familiarity to an audience, right? He's writing to Jewish Christians, he's writing to Gentile Greek Christians, and so I think that's kind of what we might expect him to do. But yes, why is it kept around as the sacred cow? Good question.
My theory is, one, yes, I also think that it is supposed to be harking back. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I think that the reason why we get the veneration part of it and the reason why this sticks around so much is because of, and the word was God. I think that's the part that makes it, we need to make this not just reason. This needs to be something different because God cannot just be reason, at least not for the theology that John's going for. We need this to be Jesus, which means this needs to be something else, or at the least it needs to be like a, how did you put it in here? Because I thought that was really good. The intermediary force between God and created world. Yes. I think that is what John is sort of going for, to like not just like, this isn't just reason, this is the divine idea made flesh. And so I think Trinitarian theology is why we get the veneration, because if the word was God, then it needs to be held at that same level, and it needs to be a part of a Godhead. Otherwise, are we monotheists?
Right.
Well said.
Right. Uh, I just like going into the rabbit hole there because of that. Like I do think if it has a like coming from somebody who met Jesus way later in her life, right? Uh coming in as a Jew just reading that, I'm like, okay, how can I be respectful of the texts without pissing off Christians? How can I try to understand what Christians mean? And that's exactly it. I think the only way to that's why I think it's incorporated. That's why I still think it's popularized. That's why I believe that the tone is so stoic philosophy, right? So we have that intermediary. Like in order to understand God, we need to understand the logos, and the logos made God understandable. And how cool is that? Yeah. Oof. Oof. Do you have an Erasmus Bible laying around there to see what word that they used, how they translated logos in Latin in 1516? I'm just curious.
Not in front of me, no.
Mac, challenge accepted. Hold my beer.
Also, I don't do Latin, unfortunately. I do Hebrew, I do Greek, I do not do Latin.
I feel like Danielle, you
Don't
should have
tell
been.
everybody at the Jesuit School of Theology.
That's just cool. Don't shut up my Latin.
That's right. That's right. Okay. I feel like I want to talk about 1 through 5 the entire evening, but let's move on a little bit. Uh who wants to take on verses 6 through 9?
I can do that.
Sounds good.
All right, I'm in the NRSVUE. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. Said the word light far too many times.
There's a lot of lights. And that's always light. Yes.
Up for those I am statements, right? You know, I'm the light of the world. And John wants to make sure it's like, by the way, before Jesus introduces himself as that, I'm going to make sure it is hammered into your heads. Yeah.
Yeah, like heads up, I want you to catch it when you see it.
Right. And it's every time it's phos and photos. Okay.
We do have an interesting, the NRSVUE does put a little footnote at the end of verse 9, where it says the true light which enlightens everyone was coming into the world. There is a footnote of, or he was the true light that enlightens everyone coming into the world. So is the light coming into the world, or are the other people coming into the world and will be enlightened? Could be either one.
It's also the world there is cosmos, right? Not like world.
So.
Makes it even more interesting. Makes it more Star-Lord.
Cosmic Jesus.
The longer that I think of it, I think Jesus is the leader of the Guardians of the Galaxy. This is the way. Wait, did I just mix up Star Wars? I always do.
This is going to be the second episode in a row where you mix up fandoms and make people sad.
Lana, stop it. In case you missed it,
no, but this does bring up the very important theological question of which disciple is Rocket. Which disciple is stealing prosthetics? We all know it's Peter.
We all know it's Peter. Peter is Rocket.
Peter's the raccoon. Like that's just...
Peter is the raccoon. I'm not the raccoon.
And the beloved disciple is Iron Fruit.
Yeah. So a man came sent from God whose name was John. What's the dealio with the meta description of describing one's own texts? Like, When is it mentioned that John is the author of
Well, this is a different John.
John?
John the Baptist and John the Evangelist are not the same John.
Okay. So he's talking
There's
about
just
John
a
the
ton
Baptist.
too many Johns.
Right. Of course. And then this John the Baptist is not the light, but he came to testify about the light. So what's going on there? What's this meta perspective like? We are talking about, is this just to fulfill the prophecy in what, Malachi?
Isaiah.
This is interesting.
Isaiah?
We're introduced to John the Baptist right here in verse 19, and so he kind of has to like get us up to speed quick, right? And I think
Okay,
that's why
okay.
he throws in, the one to testify to the light,
There you
because he's
go.
coming up quick. He's on deck in verse 19.
That's the first story. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Oh,
It's interesting to me that this is something where John's like, okay, time to get on board with the synoptic gospels for a quick second, because this part's important. We just skip everything up to here, but right, okay, I'll tell them the story about John the Baptist. I'll tell them that one.
Years.
It's just,
okay. We need this.
yeah.
I watched him across your face.
It's super interesting wording here. Like, read verse 8 a couple of times. Like, okay, yes. I'm trying to read it a couple of times in different translations. He was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. You're right.
Or
There's so
bear
many
witness, because the word is what comes where we get martyr too, which I think is ironic.
Okay.
Since you will get John the Baptist getting murdered later. So I think that's that's an interesting word choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And Danielle, you had some notes on this passage as well?
My notes don't really focus so much on John. They just speak to, I think, a general truism revealed here. And what we see is that I'm, as someone who is in the hotel and found, John's gospel in the
Gideon's Bible?
Yeah, the Gideon's Bible and the little, dresser or whatever. Why do I care about John the Baptist? I thought we were learning about Jesus, right? And so what I take away from here as like an application maybe is that our testimonies matter. Why do I care about John the Baptist's testimony? Well, his testimony here apparently means quite a bit. The testimony of John we read about is the first story we read in this gospel, verse 19, moving on from there. John the evangelist clearly holds him in very high regard. Jesus clearly holds John the Baptist in very high regard, as we see elsewhere. And so, but aside from that, I also see that like testimonies are important. And so if his testimony is so important, maybe my testimony is important, maybe your testimony is important. And maybe like the words that we say matter, and we have an ability to do things with that, to encourage and build people up, and we have the ability to point people towards Christ and reflect his light. And just imagine the powerful end of a sermon with that, right?
It works well.
That is pretty wild. I like that.
It has nothing to do with the text.
It'll preach. I was just thinking, I've got something that kind of this section is the next section, but sort of this, like, we've already talked about John being really clear about what his goal is with the gospel. Like, the goal is you're supposed to believe and you're supposed to understand and recognize who Jesus is by the end of this. And throughout the gospel, this is a part I can geek out about because this is what my dissertation's about, but recognition is like happens throughout over and over in this gospel. And John the Baptist is the first person in the gospel to recognize Jesus and to recognize him completely, is the first person to get it right. And so I think that throughout the gospel, John picks out people and tells these stories of seeing, like, did they understand who Jesus was? Kind of. Did that person understand who Jesus was? Not at all. Did that person? Yes.
Yeah.
And so, but I think it's interesting that there's also several times where Jesus isn't the only one who is either being recognized or not. Like this is first story about John that we're not going to cover today is people trying to figure out who John is, John the Baptist. And so I think there's something to it of the fact that like John gets a special mention because John gets it right first.
Well, and I think shows that it's not just that John gets it right, but John is categorically in a special category. There came a man sent from God whose name was John. And so it's like, all the places where humans didn't get it, right? Regular folks didn't get it. You're like, well, why did John get it? He has that extra, not authenticity, that's the wrong word, but extra endorsement to his testimony, right? Like he didn't just get it right. He was also got it right being sent from God.
Yes.
Harkens back to, messianic expectation and Malachi and all that, but.
Yeah, I like that. I think the author of the entire Bible is Fyodor Dostoevsky. Because, hear me out, I have good argumentation for it. Because the brothers Karamazov, right? Who is the main character? It's Alexei. But how is Alexei called? Alexei is called Alyosha. But how is Alyosha also called? Is also called Alexik, but also Loisha. This is the same problem that Scripture has, and therefore, the Bible is written by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Again,
this is going to be the soundbite that gets used on Instagram. This is the real. Let Peter know this is the real.
I'm sorry, Peter, as you're filtering through this.
That's the moment right there. we cracked the code.
We cracked the code. It's just like all the names. I can't. I should. I feel a bad theologian that I don't, but in case you're wondering, Danielle, we're not always talking about the texts.
Just a little bit of drifting.
I mix up fandoms, DC and Marvel. And what did I do earlier? Star Wars
and Marvel.
Oh.
But not even real Star Wars, The Mandalorian.
This is the way.
Let's go on.
And say there's going to be fights on Discord later.
Okay. Is The Mandalorian, you're saying, for the record, online, the world, Danielle is saying, The Mandalorian is not real Star Wars.
I'm saying at me, at Danny Paisley. Let's talk about it.
All right, there you go. The gauntlet has been thrown.
Which gauntlet? The Infinity Gauntlet? Or am I?
I walked into that.
Lana, what are you doing, Miche?
Walked right into that one.
On that note, let's continue reading. I will take my blasphemic ESV translation. And not just any, it's the She Reads Truth version.
Beautiful.
Which is the only, it's the way. They even have a nice read and understand John checklist here.
We'll just do that.
I love an understanding checklist.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's a pretty Bible. What did we say? 10 through 13, right? Okay. He was in the world, and the world was created through him, and yet the world did not recognize him, as Mack said earlier. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, he gave them the right to be children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of natural descent, or of the will of the flesh, or of the will of man, but of God.
I love that. I think that's encouraging.
Now that's John's nativity right there. That's it. That's John's nativity story.
Tell me more.
Like instead of enunciation, that's the word, right? Wow, that got away from me. There's no telling Mary you're going to have a baby. There's no Holy Spirit overshadowing Mary, no manger, nothing. All we get about the birth of Jesus is, and he was born not of blood of the will of the flesh or the will of man, but of God. Like that.
Mhm.
That's his whole thing. That's all that matters, is he was born of God.
Yeah,
Right there.
that's definitely. That's
Poor Mary
definitely
doesn't get any screen time.
didn't get any screen time. I gotta. There's still a little bit of adoption here, but not adoption of God, but the adoption moves towards the children of God this time.
Yeah, adoption of everyone else through Jesus, who is already God.
It's already God. Do you think
Yeah.
that's intentional?
Yes. Yes,
It's so cool.
I
Like
do.
first century polemics.
There's so many of them.
Take that,
Pretty much
Mark.
this whole like chapter of John is basically first century polemics.
Yeah.
Where he's like, I don't like how you said that. That can go too many directions. I'm just gonna like straighten this out right here.
That's right. That's right. Take that, Mark, whoever you were. Whether
Basically.
you were Alyosha, Alexei, or Mark, we don't care. I
Either way.
was the most loved.
That is true. I do love the false humility.
The one he loved.
Yeah. But I'm totally not going to say it's me, but you know.
Yeah.
John just always breaks the fourth wall and just like makes meaningful
Yeah,
the audience.
exactly. Just
You
like
totally froze like that.
this is great. Yeah, but you're back now. Just like
I do keep
She-Hulk.
losing my internet. I need to improve my internet. It's rough.
Oh,
Are you at home right now, or are you at your office?
No, I'm at home. I'd have much better internet at the office.
Oh. Yeah, you need better internet. That's
Whoever puts internets in houses that didn't have it originally did not put it in logical places.
yeah.
no, I love this passage. I mean, I don't so much. I mean, this is going to sound so sacrilege. I get the divinity of Christ. I didn't need to get to verse 10 to get that, right? And so where I focus on, I'd kind of jump right to 12 and 13. And I say, selfishly, how does this apply to me? Where do I fit in? And what I see here, and I put myself in first century shoes, I put myself in Danielle's shoes, and I see that this is a universal truth, right? This is a universal promise, right? The rebirth that transcends physical characteristics, all our human constructs, all the things that divide us, that label us, that other us from one another. And he says you can be united, you can be one in Christ. Not only that, you can be children of God because of God's own election or choosing or power or whatever. And so for me, as I'm sitting here and I'm like, you know what? It looks like we're going to hell in a handbasket. I read verses 12 and 13, and that's encouraging in light of the November 9th election. I mean, we'll see if this ages well.
I think
guess
so.
we'll
I
find
think
out.
so. To all who did receive him, he gave the right to be the children of God.
Yeah.
It's
I
very
do
hard.
think there's also. Oh, go ahead.
It's just very hard to argue against. It's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something also really comforting about that. The first part too, of like the word of God, Jesus, comes down and people can't recognize him, can't figure it out. They did not accept him. I think that's also something kind of comforting in that. I think for trans folks who are so used to not being accepted by people that are
Right.
we might consider our own, to know that like the word of God comes and everyone's like, no, that's not what you're supposed to look like actually. So I don't get it. And then to be like, okay, so they don't recognize him, his own do not receive him, but there's still like, that doesn't diminish who he is in this story. And we're about to watch him persistently be that throughout the next 21 chapters. I think that's really comforting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, that's all I wanted to say. I wanted to say, yeah, absolutely.
testified to by God, but also some folks did receive him. So yeah, all of us that are feeling dejected, feeling alone, you're like, you have a community, by the way, who will gladly receive you.
Hmm.
Mhm.
By the will of God, not of natural descent. There's so many cool things. From a Theron's perspective, absolutely.
So good.
Yeah. I might become a fan of John. Like this whole Jew.
I knew we'd get
Maybe.
there.
And then she read the rest of John.
Well, fair. There's lots of messy stuff too.
Yeah.
John says a
yeah.
lot of stuff that I'm like, would you be quiet? You were doing so well.
You did great. Look at how you started in the first 14 verses.
He has
Wow.
his moments.
He gets a couple more tries in there. You just gotta thumb through to the end.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Let's use the last little bit of time to read the last passage because I see some cool stuff in the notes that I want to make sure that we talk about.
Yes.
Whose turn is it?
I would love to. We've gone full circle.
Go for it.
Verses 14, I'll read through 18. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory, glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified about him and cried out, saying, This was he of whom I said, He who comes after me has a higher rank than I, and he existed before me. For of his fullness we have all received, and grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth were realized through Jesus Christ. No one has seen God at any time, the only begotten God, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has explained him. And this is the testimony of John.
I'm converting a lot of translation choices there.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting
Wow.
translation stuff in this section.
Cool.
Mack, the Word became flesh.
Yes, I do think there's something like I was regularly taught in my context that like the flesh is bad. You should flee the flesh. The flesh is only to be subdued. But the fact that, and even like the prior verse is like not of flesh, that's not how Jesus came. And yet you have right here, okay, but the Word became flesh, and the Word is God, and the Word is all of these things. And you're like, well, the flesh is included there. So the flesh cannot be just straight up evil. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. If Jesus comes in the flesh and that's not a bad thing and that is necessary, then the flesh can't be all bad. So I think that's really comforting, especially as people who are trying to, learn to live in our bodies and embody our identities. I think it's really important to remember that even on our worst days, the flesh is not bad.
Absolutely. Well said.
That's pretty. I just always was so obsessed with this passage to talk about. Okay, this is about incarnation. This is about incarnation that I missed that part. That flesh is used in a positive sentence. It's really encouraging. I like it. What say you, Danielle?
I love it, absolutely. I think it directly speaks to the Gnostic influence, like I said earlier, but also it speaks, modern times, to purity culture. It speaks to our dysphoria and myself wanting to cast away my physical form more than once. We'll see if that gets censored or not. And so, yeah, I think it's hugely affirming for me to know that this is not only created by God, the flesh aspect of Jesus' nature, endorsed by God, but chosen by God. It's not that he was born a little baby and then reached this higher nirvana where he shed his physical form. He, the kenosis, right? He was in heaven and chose to step into human flesh. And so then I see also this concept, right, in the Logos, in this in the kenosis, this dichotomy, right? This duality of we see, the theology is both fully God, fully man, and kind of introduced here in its A form, I'll say. And that's important for me, right? To know that two things can both be objectively true, even though they're seemingly exclusive of one another. And I think that's something that at least I need to cling on, be like, well, wait, hold on. Jesus is fully God and fully man. I thought you said it was only this or this.
Right. It's a concept that's hard to grasp. But if you think about it like that, and you start your worldview like that, then you already start with a sense of ambiguity, a sense of like, I don't think I can fully understand or grasp what's going on, but it makes sense somehow at the same time.
It kind of blurs some hard lines, right? Maybe
Yeah.
some room and potential for growth
Yeah.
to modify our worldviews a little bit.
Yeah. Agree. Yeah. Maybe we can be a little bit less dogmatic, even though this is a very dogmatic book, or this has caused a lot of dogmas.
Yes.
Let me be more clear there.
Yeah. Well, I think the evangelist is pretty dogmatic, but I think that's a fair statement. And I like John very much, but I think it's a fair statement. Yeah. I also I know we're running out of time, but fun little, are you actually sure about that, John? Is that what you want to say? This, no man has seen God at any time. And then, but in the verse directly before it, you might talk about Moses. Moses did see God.
Who Moses is.
Yeah. Like, so you're familiar, and then you're like, but no one's ever seen God.
Yeah.
All right. I could understand if we use like, well, no one's seen like God in like God form, because you get the theophanies of like Abraham, all those guys who like, is that God? Is that just the spirit of God in somebody else? Unclear. But Moses, like, come on, like that was his whole thing, was he specifically saw God's backside, but still saw God.
I love that.
Yeah. If somebody sees the back of me, we can conclude that they have not seen me.
That does mean that, like, if you're running fast enough, you're invisible, because people would only see the back of you, and that doesn't count.
Doesn't count.
Is what I'm hearing.
Right.
Counts.
We are two-dimensional.
So the Flash was not actually fast. The Flash was always with his back towards people.
And there's the DC.
There's the DC. Full circle.
It was coming eventually.
Final closing thoughts and takeaways. What are your final takeaways, Danielle?
I think it's great. I love it. My kind of summary, right? This section reflects on the convergence of Jewish messianic expectation, Hellenistic philosophical ideas, early Christian theology and its refinement now, or coming to be refined. It addresses both Jewish and Greek audiences, and it presents Jesus as this divine logos who brings new life, new light to humanity in a way that's never happened before. Gives us hope, and it sets the stage for the gospel's portrayal of Jesus as God's ultimate final revelation.
I like it. How about you, Mac?
Yeah, I think that it's such a good opening number for the gospel, to just be like, I'm just going to lay this all out for you so that you're not surprised by anything that's coming. And I really like that it sets the reader up for like, okay, so when I ask you the question, who is this, throughout this gospel, you're going to be like, I already know. I've already read it. I know. And every time somebody gets it wrong, you can say, oh, no, you got it wrong, because I know, because I read chapter 1.
So chapter 1.
And I think that,
spoiler alert.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, he just starts with big spoilers. But I think that it's beautiful in the way that you get the cosmic Christ, you get this pre-existent Word of God. At the same time, you get unequivocal, this pre-existent Word of God still came in flesh.
Yeah.
And I think that is beautiful.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Whew. My closing thoughts. This is complex. Yeah. And the mu is pronounced mu. Not you. Mu. Anyway.
An important PSA for all of us.
Trauma from theology classes.
I was going to say, that's your theology class trauma. There's got to be something else.
No. We will get there. We will get there. I'll have stories for every single passage, because in the Netherlands, they go through the entire Bible. You have to make overviews of the entire Bible, every single book.
That is thorough.
Yeah. Next Bible Study Live is November 20th. If anyone wants to join, we should be joined by our other regular face, Peter. So I don't know if you're available, Mac, but if you are, then next Bible Study Live, November 20th. And if anybody's
we'll have that is
it.
Trans Day of Remembrance.
Ooh, well, TBD, because we'll probably have a T-door service. Yeah. So it's probably going to be either a week before or the week after. No, week after is Thanksgiving. So
check your calendars.
Check your calendars.
Yeah.
I will be in contact with y'all. And if you're watching this and you're thinking, I would like to join BSL, this is how people join. You just message us. And before you know it, you're like right here.
Gosh.
It's very fun.
It is very fun. It is very fun.
10 out of 10 would recommend.
Thank you all for joining, and I will see you all next time.